Welcome to the closing dinner of ASU GSV 10.
10 years. And you guys are the hardy, the ones who have suffered and went through thousands of meetings from Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. You guys are the hardiest, and we're so thrilled to be here with you tonight.
We are, and I know all of you are waiting for Superman, and we'll get to him in a moment. But there's a couple things we wanted to get to first. Folks, it was just a little over a year ago that the tragedy in Marjory Stoneman Douglas took place. And as a conference of educators and people passionate about education, I wanted you to know, if you didn't already, that we have some of the students who are part of that experience here with us today. And so what we'd like to do is begin this evening with a moment of remembrance for those students here today. If you would please join us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So I think by now you all know this is the 10th year of the ASU GSV Summit. Happy anniversary. And I would like to begin by thanking our dear friends and partners at GSV, Michael Moe and Deborah Quazzo, and also their amazing team, Michael, Jason, Megan, Carrie, Emily, Susie, and hopefully I'm not forgetting anybody else, but I'm sorry if I missed you, Lubin. So thank you very much to GSV.
Oh, come on, give it up for GSV.
Thank you.
10 years, big deal.
And of course, my wonderful colleagues from Arizona State University, Phil Regier, Todd Altadonna, Janice Kleinwert, Patty Ryder, Cookie Ellis, and everybody else, Rachel Galan, and hopefully I didn't forget anybody, but big applause to my colleagues at ASU.
10 years is a really big deal. Not many things, ideas come and go, but this is one that's really stuck with our industry. Julie, is there any way we could try and visualize what a big deal, how long this has been going on for?
Absolutely. So everyone, please stand up.
Wow.
Okay. Please sit down if this is your first summit. All right, we have a lot of first-timers here. Please sit down if this is your second or third summit. Okay. Please sit down if this is your fourth or fifth summit. Sixth or seventh summit. Sit down. Oh, Tyler, you would need to sit down, right?
I'm down.
Yeah, okay, he's down.
Everyone know Julia's still standing, by the way.
Please sit down if this is your eighth or ninth summit. So
wow.
All of you remaining, 10 years, give a hand. Thank you for being with us during this amazing journey over the past decade.
Yeah, thank you to the Trailblazers who have made this conference what it is. First act in our program tonight, I am so excited to welcome to the stage a lifelong educator with a passion for helping children, and that is Denise Gallucci, the CEO of GEMS America.
So welcome, Denise.
Of course.
Good evening. Passionate, purposeful, and powerful are attributes that describe the recipient of the 2019 Lifetime Achievement Award. Geoffrey Canada is a very special man. He makes dreams happen. He is an agent of change and an unrelenting advocate for social justice. Geoffrey drew inspiration from his own upbringing, growing up in the South Bronx, in a relatively tough neighborhood. Jeff always excelled in school. He was fortunate that his teachers recognized his academic prowess and his potential and shepherded him to the most prestigious institutions in America. Doing his undergraduate at Bowdoin and graduate work at Harvard, Geoffrey paused and looked around and noticed that his story was a unique one, that his peers in urban centers across our country were not reaching the heights of top-tier institutions and colleges across our nation. And it was at that time that he decided he was going to change that. He was going to galvanize a movement and be sure to put college not only within the grasp of every student, but the expectation of every student. And there was born the vision for the Harlem Children's Zone. The Harlem Children's Zone is an incredible place, a beacon of excellence in education for not only schools across our nation, but worldwide. Geoffrey's vision for the Harlem Children's Zone was backward mapping the portrait of a high school graduate. How is it that we provide the supports necessary to students such that they believe in themselves, have the tools, resources, and resilience not only to make it to college, but through college? Geoffrey decided to start with expectant mothers, teaching them early childhood development, and new mothers, skin-to-skin touch, early learning experiences that are rich, linking mothers with community resources, raising a community to raise a school. So many times we hear stories about people who've made it out of difficult situations and achieved success. They go on to do great things. Rare is the story about the individual who defines his success by going back and ensuring the injustices that he experienced were fixed, and that expectations were changed, and that children realized their potential. And the urban youth in America, children suffering the deprivations of poverty for generations, understood that the world needs their talents. The world needs to hear their voice. He changed that. Waiting for Superman is a documentary that featured Geoffrey in 2010. He so eloquently talked about there is no Superman. No superhero is coming down to save our kids. I beg to differ, because Geoffrey Canada is a superhero. He has changed the course of students' lives for generations. He impacts directly tens of thousands of children annually at the Harlem Children's Zone, and indirectly millions and millions more here and around the globe. This man has certainly impacted my life personally and professionally, and it is my great honor to share with you some friends of Geoffrey's who also would like to share some words of gratitude with him. Please, let's see the video.
In late August, 92, my twin brother and I, we were on our way to Riverside Park, and we were confronted with several young men. One individual pulled out a weapon, aimed at my brother, and pulled the trigger, and instantly my brother was killed. After my brother died, Geoffrey Canada for me was my go-to. He was my father. He was just the only person in my life at that point to guide me through the crisis that I experienced.
Geoffrey Canada is a master of understanding the human condition. He is someone who really is concerned about the welfare of individuals and the people around him. I met Jeff back in 1970 at Bowdoin College. We used to talk about social justice and how we're going to improve the quality of life for people living in the inner cities. Jeff would always talk about, what am I going to do with this education when I get out?
As Jeff was formulating his idea for the Harlem Children's Zone, we were one of the very early funders. We were so compelled by the depth of his vision, the commitment, the comprehensiveness of the strategy.
When we started the Harlem Children's Zone, we had no money. But Jeff said, that doesn't matter. We have a great vision. And he is the visionary who shaped the concept and the ideas of the Harlem Children's Zone, which has allowed it to become one of the best organizations in America.
I think the thing that defines Jeff as a human is that he is very focused on the mission of ending generational poverty for children.
Jeff feels that education is the way out of poverty. He is determined to improve the lives of people in Harlem by giving them a great education so they'll be able to get jobs to take care of their families and their children.
We have over 700 young people now who are in college and who are on their way to having a kind of life that they would not have had but for the Harlem Children's Zone and Geoffrey Canada.
Jeff's greatest accomplishment is the ability to open up the Harlem Children's Zone and to build 2 schools. And he has had a tremendous impact on social policy. When President Obama was in office, his Promised Neighborhoods is based on many of the concepts of the Harlem Children's Zone.
I think the Harlem Children's Zone is the manifestation of everything that Jeff wants to see for all children in America.
Jeff's work and commitment to the Harlem Children's Zone can be summed up in one word, and that's inspiration. When I think of the word inspiration, I think about the spirit that he's given each of us, that we can do anything that we put our minds to.
I think the ASU GSV Summit is beautifully aligned with Jeff's mission. Both are trying to ensure that educational opportunities are available for all young people in America. And therefore, he is absolutely deserving of this award.
Congratulations, Jeff. It's well deserved.
You are a great inspiration.
We are so proud of you, and congratulations on this wonderful award.
So, my hero, your hero, and the millions of children whose lives Geoffrey has changed, the 2019 recipient of the Lifetime Achievement Award, Mr. Geoffrey Canada. Well, we have one more surprise.
Uh-oh.
So Geoffrey didn't do this work alone, as you know, and there is a very special individual who supported him throughout his life, his very best friend, George Caldoun. Where are you, my friend?
Get out of here. George is here. Oh, that's a shock.
God bless you.
Thank you, thank you. And you all have shaken me up now, so I've already forgotten what I was going to say. So, first of all, I want to thank you. This is a tremendous honor. There are not a lot of honors I get that are really meaningful, but this is absolutely going to be one. I have to tell you, there is one other honor that was important for me. Several years ago, Fortune magazine listed me as the 12th most influential person in the world. And wait, no, that wasn't it. I got a stack of those magazines, right? And I took them home to my wife, Yvonne, and they know my wife. I've been trying to impress this lady for 30 years, right? So I get the magazine. I said, honey, turn to page 27. So she flips through the magazine, looks at it, and looks up and says, couldn't crack the top 10, huh? It's all good. It's all good. Look, I'm only going to be a few minutes, but I have to say this. Denise is right. When they were filming Waiting for Superman, the film, when it was finished, it didn't have a title. About 4 or 5 months, and one day David Guggenheim called me and he said, Jeff, we have a title. It's going to be called Waiting for Superman, which was based on something that I said in the film. And the statement came from the fact that growing up in the South Bronx, I saw a community that was falling apart, and a group of adults, as best I could figure, they were going to let it. We were going to be on our own. If there were no superheroes, there was no one coming to save us. And let me tell you the end result of that. I'm 67 today. No. Not as in today is my birthday. It's 67 in general. But I should have gone with that birthday thing. I have one friend that I grew up with that's still alive. I thought when I was 9, we weren't going to make it out of there. We didn't make it out. People think, well, you got out, Jeff. Yeah, but my mother had 4 boys. One of them didn't make it at all. One is, even to this day, struggling. People think this education thing is just a matter of test scores or, counting data. Children's lives are at stake. They are not going to make it. They're going to be doomed, and we've got to take this thing seriously. And so people get angry at me because, when I finished up at Harvard, I started teaching. I only wanted to be a teacher. I wanted to do education, and I know teaching is a real profession. It takes real talent for real, and people get upset with me because I demand excellence. In poor communities, these kids don't have any other option except to get an education. And that means we've all got to have high standards, and we all have to hold ourselves accountable. And when we started our charter school, the first thing I did was I got our chancellor, I got my board, I got the community together, I got the mayor there, and I said to all of them, in Central Harlem, where we've had the worst schools for 40 years in New York State, if I didn't have a better school than all those other schools in Central Harlem, I was going to fire myself. They were like, whoa, they wrote it down. Jeff said 5 years, right? So when they left, I got my entire staff there, and I said, did you all hear what I said? They were like, oh boy, Jeff, that was bold. You said you were going to fire yourself. I said, yeah, but I just want all of you to know I'm the last one leaving. All right? I'm not joking. This thing is serious. It's important. We have a long way to go. By the way, there are people who are actively working against those of us who are trying to do ed reform. And as far as they're concerned, they're winning. They've seen real pushbacks in all the reform efforts. And I look around this country, and I see what's going on in Chicago, in Detroit, in Milwaukee. I was just in Watts last week, and I realize that our job is as important as ever. Now, I'm 67, I'm about to finish here. I will tell you, it's a young crowd, I will tell you educators how you know when it's time to get out the game. Denise is really young, she's in the game. When your students start going bald, you know it's probably time. constantly have people coming up to me, oh, Mr. Canada, when I was a kid, you changed my life, and I'm looking like, how old are you? You look like you're 50, right? Here's the deal. I thought this thing could be fixed in a couple of years. It hasn't been fixed. We've got great examples of stuff going on. But I'm going to say to all of you tonight, while I'm absolutely thrilled to accept this award, we've got a lot of work to do, and we all need to take it seriously. And we've got to go out and we've got to save America's children. That has to be job one. Godspeed and God bless.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back Julia Rosen and Tyler Bosmeny.
Good evening, everyone. Now we've come to the very heart of this event and truly the heart of the summit, which is really showcasing the most amazing up-and-coming entrepreneurs who are constantly working so hard to bring their ideas to market and change the education sector for the better forever. Now, Tyler, you won this award a few years ago, right?
Yes, 7 years ago.
7 years ago. And so what did that mean to you?
I think this is one of the most exciting parts of the entire summit because we get to see some of the most innovative companies presenting their ideas, and then everyone in this room tonight gets to pick a winner. And that company that we pick gets $50,000.
Yeah.
And I can tell you that winning this competition 7 years ago, there was no check. There was no $50,000. And I will tell you, it still meant the world when we won that competition in 2013. We were lucky enough to be selected, and getting to just tell our story, feeling like people cared about what we were doing and what we were working on, and then having the support of this community meant all the difference. As we were, just 3 people trying to build this idea, trying to make it in the world, and fast forward 7 years later today, I really see this competition as one of the birthplaces of Clever, and I'm so excited to see the next generation of entrepreneurs up on this stage and see everyone in this room get to help cheer on and celebrate and ultimately vote for some of the best new companies that are going to be rising for the future to come.
And it's my pleasure to also welcome up, you might be wondering who that lovely lady is, Beth Watson from Microsoft, who's kind enough to sponsor this event and many other things as part of the summit. Beth, can you tell us a little bit about why you're interested in this event?
Absolutely, and first of all, it's a pleasure to be here. Tyler epitomizes why we sponsor this event. And it's not because, we want that person on our software. We genuinely want to help every person on the planet achieve their full potential. And when we talk about that and we look at the entrepreneurs that we've seen in the alley and that we've had the pleasure of meeting, it is so amazing. So all I can say is wish our finalists the most amazing luck tonight. They are phenomenal.
Well, thank you to Microsoft and Beth for making this night possible. All right. Now, let's get
out their phones.
Get out your phones. Yes.
I know you all have them.
All right. So the way this is going to work is we want you to all get out your phones now and get the website loaded so that you can vote as we go. And this will be real quick here.
Yes.
So we need you to go to slido.com and then pound 1604 to get into the voting area. We'll give you just a sec to go to slido.com.
And we're going to be hearing from 3 entrepreneurs this evening, so we'll give you 1 more minute, and then Tyler's going to introduce our first entrepreneur.
Yes, of the hundreds of companies, of young companies who presented here at this conference, our judges have narrowed it down to the top 3 who you're going to see tonight. And the first company
It's
And the
getting there.
first company that we're going to welcome to the stage tonight is FlockJ with Sean Hithramani.
Thanks, guys. Hi, I'm Sean. I'm the founder and CEO of FlockJ. We're an online boot camp for tech sales. We retrain retail, finance, insurance, and other salespeople to do tech sales and get jobs at top tech companies. So the average junior sales rep lasts for only 9 months. 40% of them are unprofitable. The reason why is companies are hiring non-salespeople who learn on the job that they don't want to be salespeople. Yet there are 35 million sales reps in industries that are dying who are ready to be retrained to do tech sales. And companies pay us per trained candidate. So in the last 3 months, we built and launched an entire online school with 17 amazing students. We trained them for over 200 hours remotely. 100% of our students went to job interviews. And even before graduating, 70% of our students already had life-changing job offers. Our first class of only 17 students will generate $250,000 of revenue for us. We have 25 amazing hiring company partners, and we're adding more every week. And this market is huge. There are 500,000 new tech sales reps that are being added to the market every year. What's even more exciting is that once our graduates get their first jobs, the market gets even bigger. 33% growth in 2017 for the US employee training market is pretty incredible. At FlockJ, we've built a platform to reskill our graduates and other sales reps for the entirety of their career. And that starts with accountability and community. This is what accountability and community looks like. This is a picture from our graduating class last week. They're from places like Rogers, Arkansas, and Detroit, Michigan. They're shipping clerks, Uber drivers, immigration practitioners, car salespeople, recent grads, and everyone in between. On average, the faces in this picture were making $40,000 or less, and after 12 weeks are starting jobs making $80,000 or more, with clear visibility to upward mobility. Our mission is to empower that upward mobility through education and access. Our software allows us to double the size of our classes each cohort and deeply integrate with companies. Our next class starts on Monday. And we're the team to build this. We've built billion-dollar sales teams at top tech companies. We've started education nonprofits. And we've worked in startups in places like New Orleans and Mississippi. We've served in the Peace Corps. We've ran coding boot camps for refugees. And we're builders and teachers at heart. We're here to build a generational company. We're FlockJ. We're an online boot camp to learn tech sales. 70% of our students already have life-changing jobs, and we're in a $10 billion market growing fast. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Let's give it up for Sean. Thank you so much, Sean. So now it's my great pleasure to welcome Cassandra Espinosa Stewart, CEO of Homeroom. Come on, Cassandra.
Hello, everyone. I'm Cassandra Espinosa Stewart. It's a pleasure to be here. If you're a parent today with elementary-age students or have kids that are about to start, I think you'll be excited about what we're working on. In America today, dual-income homes are the norm. When we're talking about the K-5 market, there are 16 million kids living in homes where both their parents are working. And for these working families, after-school programs are an expensive necessity. 5.5 million kids are going to enroll in an after-school program, and their parents are going to spend $4,000 annually. Really important to note here, 70% of this spend that we are talking about is happening at an elementary school site. The other 30% is happening in community centers like the YMCA, your local neighborhood, or your Boys and Girls Club. And while that $22 billion market is large, it's actually even bigger. For every child enrolled in a program, there are 2 kids that want access to one. There is simply not enough programming. And so what you're seeing across schools are parents coming and saying, we need more options to serve our working families. And so PTAs are stepping up and finding after-school enrichment classes. These are vendors that come onto campus to lead subject-specific courses, and it's an opportunity for parents to give their kids access to coding classes. We see calligraphy classes, origami, really unique learning opportunities led by phenomenal instructors. And it is a volunteer that is taking this on. And what it culminates to after they find the vendors and they start their season, they set the season, is you as a parent, you're going to get this calendar on your school website, and it's going to show you all the offerings available. And then you have to go and register with each independent vendor. These are micro marketplaces. These after-school organizers, they are helping to facilitate this. And as a parent, it's great. You have what's available, but then you have this. You have to print out this flyer. You have to send in a check. And as a busy parent, like, let's be honest, that takes a lot of time. We bring this inefficient, fragmented market online. And we do that by building software designed for the after-school enrichment experience. It's designed for all 3 stakeholders. We work with PTAs. They use Homeroom to set up their season, invite their vendors, and now their parents have this, a way to see all their offerings in one spot, and then to add everything to your cart, and yes, book really seamlessly. What used to be a cumbersome process now only takes minutes. But what's important here is that after-school organizers are the secret to unlocking this market. For every after-school organizer that comes on, we have 115 parents and 12 new vendors join our marketplace. And we have found that spending money to acquire this PTA organizer is important. We spend about $1,500. It ends up being about $14 per parent, and they spend within their first season on Homeroom $412 with us. But more importantly, we're seeing these incredible network effects. Vendors are bringing us to new schools. We've already talked about this. A PTA comes on, they bring their vendors, their parents, that's great. They are these aggregators of this fragmentation. But they also teach vendors at other schools, and it has changed their process too, that they are actually referring us into new schools. 1/4 of the schools that we work with today have come from a direct vendor referral. Our Homeroom platform went live in August of 2018, so we have now partnered with schools in over 14 districts. 3,000 parents have booked over 8,000 classes, and they have spent over $1.6 million. We have an incredible team that is dedicated to solving this problem. We actually previously used to run after-school classes, so we understand the nuances within this space. And my co-founder, Christine, is a former teacher. And her classroom experience has just led us to build these non-obvious products that our schools love. We are backed and supported by incredible individuals. These are the individuals, they're advisors, they're investors, but they are believers in what we are doing, and they've been with us from the beginning. We are excited to be here. It's an honor. If you love what we're doing here, 3 things we'd love for you to share. If you're a parent in the audience nodding and you're living through this today, send me an email. We'd love to help your school get set up. We're hiring. If you know great candidates, we'd love to have them involved. We're hiring product managers and engineers. And lastly, if you're on a PTA or you are a superintendent that's just interested in leveling up your enrichment experience, we'd love to talk. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cassandra from Homeroom. Finally, I'd like to invite to the stage Steve Smith from IntelliSpark.
Good evening. Good evening. My name is Steve Smith, and I am co-founder of IntelliSpark. I'm also a board member of the National College Access Network. I'm chair of the board of a National College Access and Success organization called College Possible, and I'm co-author of a book called Who Do You Think You Are?, which is intended to help parents have better conversations with their teenagers about college and career. Like you, I am passionate about helping to make sure that every child has the opportunity to be the best that she can be. I co-founded IntelliSpark because after 20 years of working in this field and after tremendous work over decades by others, gaps in education opportunity and persistence remain pervasive. In our last work before founding IntelliSpark, my colleagues, my team, and I founded Naviance, an iconic brand in high schools that reaches more than 10 million students a year and where we created more than $200 million in enterprise value. But the challenge before us is huge, and along the way, we realized that as important as the work that we were doing with college and career exploration was, it was just a subset of tremendously important work that schools are doing every day to support the whole child. Schools know this. They know that keeping students on track requires much more than great teaching. It requires a holistic approach that takes into account a whole myriad of factors. And most schools, more than 70% of high schools, have already established student support teams that meet regularly, monthly, if not more frequently, to review a range of indicators, to identify risk areas, to help find opportunities to make improvement. But despite massive investments of time and resource, those teams can barely reach 20% of the population in a typical school. And this is because the work is really hard. It's because the data reside in multiple systems. It's because the people work on multiple campuses. It's because of differences in expertise that vary. It's because of mismatched priorities. It's because of schedule conflicts. And so we're working to build a system to address some of these underlying obstacles and to focus on the root causes of student performance issues, not just on the symptoms. So we're picking up where dashboards and data visualization tools leave off to help staff not just identify problems, but to solve them, to create a circle of care around every child, where all of the staff in the school work together and where they work with the adults in the community who are part of a child's care team to make sure that every kid can be a success and that every kid has a personalized plan. We know that schools struggle with lots of data, but often have difficulty extracting intelligence from it. We know that practitioners are too often left to rely on gut feel instead of on evidence when making decisions in the moment. We know that there's a fragmented plethora of systems and tools that schools are using that sometimes make the work even harder because you don't know where to turn and where to start. And we know that key stakeholders may not even work in the school, which means they're excluded from those systems and processes where work gets done. And as a result, student support in schools often looks more like triage when we wish it looked like wellness care. And so we've created a system to put data and communication and action in one place. And we're off to a great start. We've got 9 paid pilots that we call design partners spread across the country who are working with us on a daily basis, helping us gear up for a market launch this fall. We've built a great team, and that team has worked together before, giving us the confidence of knowing that we've already tackled big challenges, working to tackle even larger challenges in the future. And we've got a great team of advisors who are deeply engaged in our work and who bring that ever-important practitioner's perspective. And we have a proven track record of building a scaled business in K-12 EdTech. So thank you for listening, and you'll find us on Twitter, on Facebook, and LinkedIn. And if you are at all interested, our publisher would be very happy if you picked up a copy of our book at Who Do You Think You Are? WDYTYA.info. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now is the most exciting part.
It's the voting time.
It is up to all of you to decide which one of these fabulous entrepreneurs and their companies are going to take home $50,000 this evening. So please, pull out your phones, slido.com, and let's do this. Live voting. All right. Block J with an early lead, but homeroom's making some ground. Up some gains by IntelliSpark. All right. I think we have our winner.
And
Congratulations, Lock J.
Slightly
Right.
spoiled.
Thank you very much.
All right. Congratulations, Lock J, and our runners-up. I think we have a photo.
Oh, cool. Right.
Congratulations.
So let's thank all of our
Photos, you
fantastic
never forget
entrepreneurs
this.
and thank you all for voting.
Oh, come on, Saber. Take a quick
Get
photo.
one more photo.
Right here. Yeah, of course. Who else can hold it?
There we go.
All right.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well done.
Hi, as we're getting ready to set up for John Fallon interviewing Prime Minister Blair, I just wanted to once again thank each and every one of you for being here at our 10th annual ASU GSV Summit. Every event I've thoroughly loved, but I gotta say, I think this year in particular was especially amazing, and it's really because of the people in this room that make it happen. And I also like to say, you know, putting on an event with 5,000 people, with 350 companies, people coming from around the world, is really difficult, and it's become a full-year job for some people. And while I appreciate all the nice comments that people come up to me and they come up to Deborah and they say, you know, how amazing this is and what a great job, the truth of the matter is it's our team that makes this all happen. So I just want you to please recognize some of the people that have made this event become what it is. First, Kerry Radagero, who's been here not only the last 10 years, but he's worked with Deborah and I for like literally 20 years. Also, Megan Junkins, who's backstage, doing a terrific job. Michael Casa, working with all the corporate sponsors, and again, we just continue to get incredible feedback from you. We appreciate all of your support. Susie Hahn, who is just, does everything incredibly. Michelle Fickney, who works with Deborah. Stephanie Martinez, who's a new member of the team, has just stepped in and done an incredible job. I really appreciate her efforts. I'd also like to recognize our partners at GPJ who helped us organize and put on the event. Also the team at Hyatt, in particular Celia, who just makes anything happen that we ask of her, as well as, so give her. And then of course our amazing partners at Arizona State University who've just been completely awesome. So please give everybody a hand. You guys can do better than that. Get warmed up. Come on. And again, mark your calendars for next year, which will be March 30th through April 1st. Thank you. Now for the main act.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome CEO of Pearson, John Fallon, and former Prime Minister of Great Britain, Tony Blair.
London calling from the Clash. No better way to start. Good evening, everybody. Really looking forward to this session. Just before we start, I should declare an interest because, as Michael Moe and I were discussing in a session earlier this evening, I spent the first 10 years of my professional life actually working for Labour Party politicians in the UK in various roles, including a time working for a man called John Prescott, who was actually Tony's Deputy Prime Minister. for all 10 years. And this is not me being rude. We agreed, you know, us Brits are very informal types, so we agreed I could call our former Prime Minister Tony. So he's happy with that. So anyway, but and then after 10 years of working for the Labour Party in various roles, I made the decision to move into business. And there was two reasons for that. One, I just had this inkling or this instinct that it was possible to have as bigger impact on the world for the better, to make an impact on the things that I cared about in business as well as in politics. And within a few years, I ended up at Pearson, whose whole mission and raison d'etre is to empower people to progress in their lives through learning. And I look around this room tonight, and I don't need to convince any of you that all the very best businesses are defined not by the profits sustain them. What defines us all is doing something important and useful to society, and there is nothing more important and useful than what we're all doing here, which is bending that arc of human progress more surely and more quickly in the right direction. So I feel completely confident about that reason. Thank you. But the second reason was, in 1992, Labour had just lost the general election that everybody expected it to win, 1992. It was the fourth election campaign I'd been involved in, and being the brilliant political pundit I am, I decided there was no prospect of Labour ever again forming a majority government, so I might as well go and do something different with my life. 5 years later, this man went and won the biggest election landslide in modern history. So I am officially the world's worst ever political pundit, and it's all Tony Blair's fault. He went on, as we know, to win two further general election campaigns. He is unquestionably the most successful, certainly Labour Party politician in electoral terms of all times. There's a phrase in Britain that's often quoted about all political careers end in failure. Well, you finish your political career undefeated in any election campaigns, and unusually, and actually, unlike Margaret Thatcher, you went at a time that was of your own, or largely of your own choosing. Since then, I think as many of you know, Tony has established the Tony Blair Institute, which its whole reason for being is to make globalization, I believe it is, work for the many, not the few. Has done a huge amount of work around bringing better governance to countries around the world, to using sport to champion better health for young people. I know very committed to bringing political stability and economic growth to countries that most desperately need it. And something I'm keen to talk about tonight, I think most recently got involved in a campaign to really bring better quality education to combat extremism and bring and promote tolerance. And finally, Tony, Prime Minister Blair, is one of our own. You created and delivered a graduate course at Yale on faith and globalization, and that has now become a master's, which is taught each year at Yale, Durham, and I believe the National University of Singapore as well. So please join me in giving a very, very warm welcome to Tony, Prime Minister Blair. So I've been crowdsourcing questions through the day, and as painful as it is for us, I'm afraid there's only one place to start. And that's with Brexit. We've all been following the news, so we know that the European Union earlier tonight have now agreed to further extend Britain's exit to October. Let's not talk about the sort of, the machinations of what might happen next. More, it's a pretty intractable position. How did we get here? And how do we get out of it?
Okay, right.
Nice, easy one to start.
Yeah. So first of all, John, it's great to see you. It's great to see how after working with me, you went up in the world. Look at him now. I mean, I knew him when he was nothing, and what he is CEO now. Very smart. So it's great to see you again. We actually know each other probably for 25 years. So, well, I came 5,400 76 miles from London to San Diego to escape Brexit.
I know. Tell me about it.
The first question is about
tell
Brexit.
Me about it. Tell me. It gets better.
Yeah.
It gets better.
So, look, why have we come to this pass? Actually, there's a lesson in it for politics more generally today, certainly in the Western world and maybe beyond it. And that is that there is a form of populist politics which can use the anger that people feel often about their situation, their anxieties, their worries, particularly over questions like immigration, and they can use that in order to mount a campaign which, when you analyze it in a sensible way, is contrary to the interests of the country, but they can present it as if it's a great patriotic endeavor. And one of the big lessons of this is that when the populists try and ride the anger, it's up to us to provide the answers, okay? Because there are answers to these problems, but pulling Britain out of the biggest political union and largest commercial market right in our doorstep is not a smart move in the 21st century. So I'm a passionate opponent of it. I think this extension gives us a chance to think again. And if we do, frankly, Europe should also think again. Because the truth is, a lot of the anxieties that were driving the Brexit vote in Britain are anxieties that are felt all over Europe. So European politics at the moment is, well, you know, we're here in the US, so, right. So we won't mention the T word if I'm mentioning the B word, but, but all over the Western world, the same forces are upending traditional politics. And in my view, the smart thing to do is you've got to understand what are the pressures that are driving it, and you've got to try and, as I say, provide solutions to problems of communities and people who feel left behind by globalization. Yeah. And one of the reasons the topic here is so important, education, is that in the end, the only answer to the challenges of globalization is to get better connected and better educated. Yeah. So this is the...
And on that, I think one of the things that makes it more intractable is, it strikes me as it's one of the first big issues, certainly of my lifetime in Britain, where you couldn't define people's position by whether they were on the left or the right, because this is not just completely destroying the Conservative Party, it's causing huge divisions within the Labour Party as well. So, I sense, you know, similar trends elsewhere. So these have become sort of almost like sort of guttural issues of culture and identity. One of the things I've always most admired about you as a politician is your ability not to retreat from the argument, but actually to take it on, to reach out to the sort of other side and actually stand in their shoes, shuffle around and try to understand. How do we do that?
Well, it's hard because we've got to understand for many people, they're living lives where incomes have often been stagnant. You know, their disposable income is very small. There are real inequalities within society. And there's also a sense that the world is changing fast and people are losing control.
Yeah.
And they see their communities changing and their way of life changing. And they also, I think, feel the culture that they're used to and growing up in, that is also changing. Now, in the end, you know, the important thing is to try and make sense of that to people, because ultimately the drivers of this change are technology, principally, I think, trade, migration, the way the world's becoming much, much closer together, the fact that today what happens in China has an impact in America. You know, this is the way the world is, and it's not going to slow down. But what we need to do is to show people there is a way through to the future that reignites, first of all, a sense of optimism, and secondly, the generational promise. Because I think this is a generation that feels that the next generation may not do better than them.
Yeah.
Right? But the promise, the generational promise was always that our kids are going to do better than us. Right? I think that's what's been broken at the moment. And you know, populism, whether it's off the left or the right, is driven by pessimism.
Yeah.
And if people are pessimistic about their future and they think the world's changing in a way they can't understand and don't like and can't control, then they're they're quite easy prey for people who come along and say, look, everyone's let you down, I've got the answer, it's a simple answer, here it is. So, in the case of Britain with Brexit, the real tragedy is that for 3 years, it's not just the destructive impact of Brexit, but the distractive impact. For 3 years, we've been arguing about this, when there are such pressing problems that are really going to determine the future of the country that we can't.
And the opportunity cost of that is huge.
It's immense.
So broadening out then the lessons of Brexit to a bigger chance. I think one of the, the vote leave slogan of take back control, we may not like the sentiments behind it, but it was arguably a brilliant piece of political communication because it synthesized so many of those things that you talk about. And, one of the big themes of this conference this week has been, as we were talking about backstage, the link between education and employment. And one of the areas where many people perhaps feel they've lost control is over the livelihoods and future careers of their children, as you were just talking about, their standard of living, and that's compounded by fears around automation, technology, the robots are going to take our jobs, all of that. Are you an optimist or a pessimist when it comes to what the impact of the fourth industrial revolution is going to be?
I'm an optimist, but I never know whether that's based on evidence or just my innate.
When in doubt. Yeah.
Well, if you've been 10 years Prime Minister, you've got to be an optimist, really. So I think, of course, it will affect huge change. And it is the 21st century equivalent of the 19th century Industrial Revolution, except it's going to happen at a bigger speed and a deeper scale. So it is enormous in its effect, but we can come through it.
Yeah.
And it also offers us enormous opportunities. So for example, in the field of education, as with healthcare, technology is going to offer us the possibility of teaching and learning differently. And this is a positive, not a negative. But you can only, this is why we've also got to build a greater sense of cohesion in our societies. One of the things that really worries me today is that our politics and our countries are becoming very polarized. And if you're not careful, you end up with two groups of people who aren't talking to each other, listening to each other, or even liking each other.
Yeah.
And when that happens, it becomes quite dangerous because it's then hard to have the sense of unity in the face of national challenge that a country really needs to make progress. And this is exacerbated by the way conventional media has also become fragmented, because I think it is pretty much true here, but it's certainly true back home, that the conventional media is kind of divided into two groups.
Yeah.
And they basically, as their commercial model has come under attack from technology, so they've decided the simplest way of commercial survival is to take a group of people and keep them permanently angry. So, when you then combine that with social media, that is a revolutionary phenomenon, that's when these surges of feeling are very intense, and they happen in a very polarized way. Now, my view is you've got to try and build bridges, and you've got to explain. This is why the issue of education in a broader sense is so important, because it can allow you both to understand the world, and what people understand, they can eventually get comfortable with. What they're ignorant about, they usually end up fearing.
Yeah.
Right, and this is what's important, I think.
So I want to come back a little later to the social media, which designed to bring us together, which is having this effect in some ways of allowing this or enabling this extremism and what we think about regulation like. But first, let's stick with education for a minute and the link to employment. You make the link between the Industrial Revolution of the 19th century and this fourth industrial age. One of the lessons we learned from the 19th century with the Luddites, it's always easier for people to see the jobs that will be lost than to imagine the jobs that will be created. You talked about education. Famously, you said, 1996, asked me my 3 priorities for government: education, education, education. If Tony Blair makes a comeback, or you are sort of coaching the next generation Tony Blair, Is it still? Are your 3 priorities still education, education, education?
I think this time I put it in capital letters.
Right, okay.
Yeah. No, I really do, because I think in 2 ways. First of all, it is obvious in a changing world that you are going to have to be educated in order to make the most of the opportunities and in order to have the skill, right, to be able to navigate what is going to be a different and changing world of work. And that's why I think today, there shouldn't just be changes in the way we do education through the application of technology, but we need to change how we educate. So, for example, today, I think creative skills are really, really important. Emotional skills are very important. I think learning to be a global citizen is actually an important part of education today. And it's about the way we teach, it's about what we teach, and all of that is going to undergo a big change. But then secondly, it's obvious that you cannot start education, when you get to the age 5 and end it when you get to age 18 or 21. You're probably going to be trying at least to educate young children below the age of 5, and you're going to be wanting then to educate and reskill people throughout life. So this is, I think, one of the reasons I made that my sort of campaign slogan 20-odd years ago was because I could see that the way the world was changing. In my view, that change has done nothing but accelerate in the meantime. And I think in the last 10 years, even since I left office, these changes are even bigger. And this, one of the things that I think that's really interesting to reflect upon is this technological revolution is not really at the center of the political debate yet, except in a very narrow way. In other words, if you went into the British Parliament or even the American Congress today, and you said, what are we going to do about the tech industry? They'd immediately think, big tech, regulation, right? So they'd have a debate about, should Facebook be regulated or not, or how should it be, and so on and so forth, right? But if it's really the case that you're going to get a change as profound as that of the 19th century's industrialization, then it should be impacting every area of policy. So when I left office, you could still look at defense policy, education, healthcare, law and order, local government, and then technology. But today, technology goes across all of those areas. So I had a presentation from some of the senior people in the American defense establishment a few weeks back. It was all about technology, right? Now, if that's the case, then our education system obviously becomes pivotal, because it's, unless you're properly educated and you understand these changes and can operate in this world of change, the world of work is going to be alien to you. But secondly, it's got to change the way government works. And the problem is government, I see this even more clearly now I've left government. It's a slow old thing.
Yeah.
It doesn't operate fast. And I always say this, if the Labour Prime Minister after the war, Clement Attlee, came back to Britain today, everything would be new to him. As he walked around London, he'd be astonished at how it had changed, the makeup of the population, what people were doing, the way we lived, the way we worked, the way we thought. And then you go back into Downing Street and the seat of government, and you feel completely at home.
Now, you did try to change that. Not many people in the audience will know that, but as well as that same speech where your 3 priorities were education, 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 you also unveiled a major report you'd commissioned written by a mutual friend of ours, Dennis Stevenson, which was really about, was groundbreaking in its time, about saying, every school in Britain had to be hooked up what we then called the super information highway, and the role of technology was going to play in education. What did you learn from that in terms of actually really making that change happen, and how government can affect and transform the way education works? I think it's an issue that every single person in this audience will be grappling with in some way or another.
I think to be self-critical, we didn't really understand its full implications at the time. I always remember I went on a car ride with Al Gore. This was when I just got into power, and he explained the internet to me. It was one of the... He's so smart, Al, but you always come away from a conversation feeling an acute sense of your own stupidity. And, but, so we were kind of grappling with this in a way. I think if I was back there today, I'd be changing the whole way that government worked. Now, you're right, a lot of what we did was groundbreaking at the time, but if I look back on it, I think we underestimated the impact. And here's another thing that I think then becomes really important, is that if technology is going to change the way that we educate and the way that we learn and teach, I think we've also got to develop a much greater appetite for innovation in education. And one of the perils, again, of a very sort of heavy government bureaucracy, whether at a local level, a state level, a national, federal level, is that innovation and government don't always sit well together. And one of the things I would definitely do if I was back in office today is I would be, first of all, getting a different sort of advice coming in, often from people outside the governing apparatus. And I think I would be allowing a much greater experimentation with what might work and what might not. Because it should be possible now, through the use of technology. It's not a substitute either for the teacher or the process of learning, but it should be possible at least to personalize to a greater degree the education of each individual pupil. It should be possible to get teachers with much better quality understanding and equipment at their fingertips. And it should also be possible to give us much better data about what is working and what is not working. But I think, one of the things that, because I spend a lot of time in the tech world now, one of the things that really interests me is, first of all, that nowadays, virtually anything that anyone is doing can be disrupted in some way. And so it's the applications are constantly being invented and reinvented. And the second thing is that there is a frame of mind that people bring to that process that is very inquisitive, very creative, and is prepared to try things. Yeah. And I think this is, so for me, I think, yes, to go back to your question, absolutely education would be central, but I would be trying to do it in a way really completely different from how we did it back 20 years ago.
So you said in the course of that answer, innovation and government don't always go well together. I think that may be the understatement of the conference.
We have to educate people about the concept of the British understatement.
I think just for the benefit, a small sort of historical footnote. Dennis Stevenson, who wrote that report, then became the chair of Pearson. And he must have given the report to my predecessor, Marjorie Scardino, because a couple of weeks later, she was selling the investment bank and the theme parks and the television and the Chateau Latour, and we were all in education and technology. So it had an impact somewhere along the line. Anyway. Switching gear a little bit, because I know this was something that you were keen to talk about tonight. And on a slightly more somber note, it's only 3 weeks since the horrendous shooting massacres in Christchurch. I think we were all incredibly impressed by the sort of grace and empathy and leadership showed by Jacinda Ardern, the New Zealand Prime Minister. But how do we respond to something as just as sort of, unimaginable as that? And what is the role of education in trying to combat that extremism and promote that tolerance?
Well, I think, first of all, we responded in the way that she did respond, which is with humanity and compassion and exhibiting all the right values in the face of the wrong ones. That for sure. But secondly, I think we have to go deeper into the drivers of this hatred. And this is where I think education really does have a role. And I think we have to be, we have to take it as a guiding principle of our education system and indeed our societies, that we try and educate our young people to an open-minded view of the world. And what that means is that, you are open to those who are different faith, different culture, different race, different ethnicity or color. This is, if the world is going to work through connectivity, then prejudice becomes not merely morally wrong and socially regressive, it's actually an economic problem too. If in the end you're going to have a world in which people genuinely try and work out how they can come together and solve problems that often cannot be solved unless people are working together, then young people from an early stage need to be educated to that open-minded approach to the world. And so one of the things my institute's working on is how do we make sure that we try and get some common rules across the world on education systems, formal and informal, and how we deal with hate speech and hate thought of whatever sort, whether it's against Muslims, against Jews, against Christians, whatever it is. And one of the things we have done in recent decades, after a long struggle, is, with most of the world in support of this, is to say what happens within a country's borders on the environment is not just their business, because it's everyone's business. Yeah. Right? And I think we should do the same with the encouragement of open-mindedness and the rooting out of prejudice within education systems, formal and informal. It should be a global responsibility of each nation to make sure that they're trying to educate their young people to be tolerant of others, respectful towards others, and open-minded towards them. And, we have been discussing this now with many different leaders in the world, and I think there's a fair chance.
You feel you're making progress?
Yeah, I feel we are making progress because, the plain and simple fact is, young people don't naturally hate.
No.
I'm afraid they learn to hate, and they learn because people are trying to teach them to hate.
And here again, there's this very clear arc from education to employment, isn't there? Because one of the big challenges is there is a generation of young people around the world who are either unemployed or underemployed, and how we deal with that. I know UNICEF, I was in DC on Friday, a meeting of Generation Unlimited, which is this UNICEF attempt to really sort of focus on this. I think this is
it's vital. And the point is, one of the other things we do is in the Institute is we have education programs where we link up children of different faiths across the world. And there are several 100,000 young students in these programs. I would like to take all of that further. And then we do a lot of work through the Institute in Africa, where we're working in some of the poorest countries in the world, where it isn't just a problem of development anymore, it's also a problem of extremism, radicalization, and it all gets mixed up together. And one of the things that, my wife just sent me something earlier today about, a young woman in Asia who had been, because she was trying to stand up for her rights as a woman, had effectively been disabled by people attacking her. And, this is just, these people who are propagating these views, it doesn't come out of nowhere. It comes out of, I'm afraid, misguided teaching. Often it comes out of the internet, of course, but it also comes out of a situation where people are attracted by ideologies that are based on prejudice and on thinking diversity is a threat and not actually an opportunity for society.
And I want to come back to that in a minute. It's just a really important point, and I know you are a big champion of Africa, and the other side of the globalization stories is actually some very encouraging news about just the hundreds of millions of people who've been lifted out of poverty. But just before we go there, just finishing off on the New Zealand for a moment. One of the sort of unintended consequences, we did see some of the live footage of the massacre actually sort of shown on social media, and that has brought into sharper focus a debate that's already raging. As I left London on Monday, the government had published some new regulations around how do you sort of manage social media. You've got Mark Zuckerberg at Facebook belatedly trying to get ahead of the debate that's happening here in Congress. I think it's Singapore. So this is a big phenomenon. Where do you sort of stand on the, freedom of speech, technology and digital is fundamentally a force for good, and this issue of it does seem to be enabling and facilitating extremism and almost putting people back into more extreme positions? How do we square this?
It's a big challenge, but I mean, I have two very clear views on this, which have developed over time. Number one, I'm intolerant of intolerance. I mean, I think there's a difference between free speech and using free speech in order to create hatred against others, and I think we're just going to be really tough on it. Secondly, in my view, my institute just published a paper on this recently. These major technology companies are equivalent to utilities in many ways. And what I say to them is, you're going to get regulated. The only question is, what type of regulation? Is it sensible? And does it allow us to have the innovation that these companies often bring and the benefits that consumers like, whilst putting in place some public interest responsibility? But there's no doubt, these large tech companies, I mean, they're behemoths that wield enormous influence, and it's important that they operate within a set of public interest responsibilities.
And how do the CEOs of these big technology companies react when you tell them that they're not sort of innovative disruptors, but utilities?
To be blunt about it, what I say to them is, there's no point. I say to them, look, I think many of your companies have developed great things. I'm just telling you, it's a fact. The world of politics is going to get involved in regulating you. So you've got a choice. You either get sensible regulation because you're actually moving out ahead and saying, okay, let's talk about it, or you're going to get them coming down on you like a ton of bricks. So it's your choice. And to be honest, I think there is an understanding now that this is going to happen. Because look, there are many things that Facebook has done that allow people to connect with each other in ways that are very good. Businesses can start as a result of it. All of that's great. But it's absurd if you've got a private company having sole responsibility, and it being up to them what types of speech or what types of video you show on the internet. This is something where there's a public interest, and the public, through government, has got to be involved in this, and there's no way out of that. And if they're sensible, they'll understand it and cooperate.
And again, I guess there's a historical analogy again between the Industrial Revolution and this fourth Industrial Revolution. There was a time when we stopped talking about electrical companies. Electricity just became as natural as breathing, and I guess at some point we stopped talking about digital because it is just
right. So the interesting thing is that if you look at how the 19th century Industrial Revolution developed, it developed with a lot of companies making big changes, and at first they resisted legislation. They didn't want health and safety legislation or factories legislation. They resisted the notion that they were public utilities, but in the end all these things came to pass. The important thing, I think, with this technology revolution is to realize it's going to happen much faster, and its impact is probably going to be greater. So this is why you've got to get it into the political debate now, and it's because there will, by the way, be enormous opportunities in healthcare. There'll be fantastic opportunities to change the way we treat people as a result of technology. But it's got to become part of the political debate. And it's difficult. It's difficult for people of my generation, at least. Being nice to you, I think you're younger than me. So my son actually has a technology company in education, indeed, and his wife is also in technology, and they both say to me, you should never talk about technology in public because we have a vast accumulated evidence that you don't understand it. Yeah.
But you understand the potential to personalize, to adapt, to democratize, to transform educational opportunities.
No, the most humiliating thing was when my son sent me, because I was asking him all about blockchain. Blockchain. See, he finally sends me something that's literally entitled The Idiot's Guide to Blockchain.
Well,
and I still couldn't understand it.
If it's any comfort, Michael Moe asked me about blockchain this afternoon. I'm not sure my answer was much more compelling. So then I wanted to come. I think you've been championing the cause of Africa. I think you're an optimist of Africa, and if sort of Brexit is a concern that globalization is, helping the few and not the many, perhaps there's growing evidence maybe that in places like China, across Africa, in large parts of the sort of what we previously called the emerging economies, the opposite is happening. It is opening it up. Is that what you think?
Africa's got huge challenges, and those challenges aren't going to abate very easily, but its middle class is going to double in the next 20 years. Actually, you're going to have the population 2025, I think, will overtake China and India. If you put together the 50 countries of Africa, they're going to be about 40% of the, that younger working age population. So the death rates from all the main killer diseases are coming down. No, there are real prospects of advance, there's no doubt. But here's one of the things I'd say to people involved in education. They desperately need new ways to educate their young people. I mean, human capital is going to be quite soon their biggest constraint. At the moment, it's things like infrastructure, getting the electricity, the roads, the ports, and so on, and all of these things are going to remain for the next 15, 20 years big challenges. But increasingly, as they develop their economies, if they can't educate their young people properly, they're going to face big problems. So far, they can educate an elite well, but educating the broad mass of people, there's a long, long way to go. And a lot of them, by the way, are very interested in bringing some of the best ideas on education into their countries. And many of the presidents I work with, because I have teams of people who live and work in the country and work alongside the president's team, many of those presidents are willing to experiment and bring in new people and new providers and see what can work in a developing world. And there may be opportunities for them actually to bypass some of the legacy problems of the Western systems.
And a good example of that, a country like Kenya that is truly a mobile-first country. I mean, you go there, everyone has a phone, and a company that will be familiar to many people here, in which Pearson has been a long-time shareholder in Bridge International Academies, which is precisely using mobile technology to bring a better quality education and more definite outcomes to far more people.
And that's the great thing about the world today. There is a market in ideas, and it's one of the things I always say to the governments I work with is, you think your problems in your country are unique. They're not. The context is unique, but actually the problems are very similar. So go out and learn of the things that are happening. There are amazing things happening in some of the Indian states, for example, where they've lifted education attainment, up significantly just in the last couple of decades. So this is what I think is exciting about the world today. There's lots of great things happening, and one of the things that's really important is to get government into the frame of mind where it becomes an enabler. It thinks of itself less as just controlling things and regulating things, even though that can be important, but thinks of itself in terms of enabling and empowering. This, I think, you need a different spirit in today's world for government to make best use of the change that's out there.
No, I completely agree with that. And on that note, and as we draw this conversation to an end, one of the themes of this meeting has been about the arc of human progress. And there's that famous quote by Dr. Martin Luther King: "The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice." Do you still believe that? Is it bending towards justice? And what could we all do that would help it to bend that way more quickly?
Yeah, no, I do believe that. And what you can do is, do what you're doing and do more of it. I mean, look, the thing about, we all know in our own lives the difference education has made. And, one of the reasons I was passionate about education was because I was very lucky and I got a good education. And, I remember the teachers that made a difference in my life. I remember the people that taught me how to think and reflect. I remember the first teacher that got me to think about, I'd been reading Shakespeare and all the Dickens and all the traditional British stuff, and I'd been passing my exams. But this teacher was the first one to make me think critically about it, want to go deeper into it. And, this is a fantastic thing. There's nothing more exciting than when your mind opens to new possibilities and when your horizon is extended and when you can see further and when you're fascinated and interested by what's happening. And even today, by the way, I'm always learning. Yeah. In fact, I always say to people, it's a pity I didn't know all the things I've learned since leaving office. When I was in office, I've probably done a better job. But, it's the way the world works today. You can have that opportunity. So every child that is denied that opportunity is a glaring injustice that has to be rectified. Every child that doesn't have that opportunity. Every young person. And if you want to know what really makes me optimistic, because wherever I am in the world, whether it's out in the Middle East or in Africa or in China or in India, wherever it is in the world and in our own countries, you give that young person a chance, they'll make the most of it. Okay, not everyone does, but the vast majority do. And that is the greatest gift that you can give to that young person. So if you're allowing that young girl or young boy the opportunity to explore the possibilities of their own potential, there's nothing better that you can do for them, and there's nothing that's going to make their life more real, more exciting, and
so, ladies and gentlemen, I don't know about you, I can't think of a better way to synthesize everything that's been said in the last 3 days than what Prime Minister Blair has said there. So, Tony.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.